Good afternoon. I am Jack Cordell. To my left is Peter Fallon. To my right is Nathaniel Casey. And we're here to discuss Bram Stoker's Dracula and some interesting Gothic aspects throughout the novel. Our first question is in regards to the mystery and suspense Bram Stoker develops throughout Dracula. And I believe Peter has something wise to say about that.
I do. One of the first areas we see Bram Stoker talking about mystery and suspense is when we see him crawling down the side of the castle. There's a quote: "But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from that window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings." Here we see Dracula crawling out and having some animal-like characteristics, able to crawl down a castle, which no man can do. We are in shock about how one can do this. We don't really know what is possessed. It makes no sense. We don't really know what is going on with Dracula that allows him to crawl down a castle wall.
Yeah, that first scene really, where Jonathan Harker becomes a prisoner at Dracula's castle, it sets up that very mysterious character that Dracula, first is, because we don't at first understand that he's a vampire and what's going to happen throughout the novel. So there's a lot of aspects in that first encounter that develop a very mysterious persona for Dracula. And another instance is when Dracula touches a crucifix held by Jonathan Harker on page 32, chapter 2. "I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there." And that's a development of this mysterious Dracula, because we don't really understand why that's happened yet. Bram Stoker leaves out the fact that he's a vampire. That is a fact that develops throughout the novel.
Yeah, throughout the whole novel, there's kind of like a sense of trickery, and you don't know what's going to come next. And that starts all the way back in chapter 1, when Jonathan's talking about their ride through the mountains, and he says, "We wound on our serpentine way." And the idea of serpentine, like the snake, there's something sneaky about it. There's something deceptive. The snake is obviously an evil character, so just in the biblical sense. So that sets up in chapter 1 for more disguises coming on later. And another technique that Stoker uses is the relationship between the weather and human emotions. And he uses chiaroscuro, the contrast between good and bad, or light and dark, to bring out these emotions. So does anybody have something to say about that?
Well, in the first instance, when Jonathan Harker is on his way to Transylvania and Count Dracula's castle, on that real estate journey, it discusses at first how beautiful going through the Carpathian Mountains it is. And then, as he gets closer and closer to Count Dracula's castle, there's first, obviously, those ominous events that happen. There's that light that's floating in front of him. But also, as he gets closer and closer, the weather darkens and it becomes stormier. And that's our first image between that contrast of beauty as the beauty's going away as he gets closer and closer to that evil that Dracula represents.
Yeah, and Stoker makes us realize how without the good, we can't see the bad. So he wants to write a Gothic novel which has depressing tones, but it can't all be gloomy and dark. There has to be some bright chords to pull that out. So another example of chiaroscuro I found was when Jonathan first arrives at the Count's castle, and it's a contrast between light and dark. "Suddenly I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky." So here we have the contrast between the bright moon in the background and the jagged lines of the castle in the foreground. And that atmosphere creates a tension in Jonathan's body. He doesn't yet know that Dracula is evil, but he has the beginnings of that that knowledge.
So other than Chiaroscuro and Mystery and Suspense, there's several other Gothic elements throughout the novel, but what is another one that we can discuss?
Stoker does a great job in developing this feeling of entrapment, especially in the beginning with Harker inside Dracula's castle. And here's a quote from page 33, chapter 2. I explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save from the windows in the castle walls, is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner. And Harker really, believes that he's a prisoner throughout his stay at Dracula, because Dracula insists that he can only fall asleep in his own bedroom, and all of a sudden there's all these rules in which he has to obey while in Dracula's castle. And he really, by the end, feels that he's a prisoner. He's no longer there on just a business trip. He's really, he feels like he's in some moral danger as that prisoner. And Stoker does a great job in, using all this mysterious aspects of Dracula to really develop this feeling of entrapment.
Yeah, going along with another entrapment, there's a quote on page 52 from Harker. I ran to the door, intending to descend and try and join them through the main hall, as I thought that way might be open for them. Again a shock. My door is fastened on the outside. Harker, he's starting to actually realize that he is trapped inside Dracula's castle, and he's really trying to make any escape that he can. When he hears some people rolling up with their carriages and their horses and everything, he's trying to call out to them, but he's not able to get there. And I guess this also could be an example of Chiaroscuro, showing that the light is people coming up trying to possibly save him, but the dark of him being trapped in the house and really having no way out. So the feeling of entrapment is definitely prevalent in the whole novel.
They're entrapped in a literal sense. Like Jonathan in the beginning, he can't leave the castle, but then also later, as the novel progresses, they get trapped in a figurative sense because when Mina gets bit, she's not dead yet, but they know that if she dies before Dracula dies, then she'll become a vampire. So they're trapped against time, which is pretty interesting. Another question that I want to ask you is, what effect do you guys think that the epistolary style of the novel has on the overall plot and emotions of it? So he writes everything in letters and diaries, and how do you guys think that affects the novel?
I think that makes it a lot more interesting, hearing everyone's different perspectives, and not just having it from like a third-person narrator or a first-person narration or anything like that. Getting everyone's viewpoints out in the open is just kind of
to go on for that. Later in the novel, really our two main storytellers is Mina's journal and then also Van Helsing, and I think they're two different characters with two different aspects. And I think that helps to develop, how the story is going to progress or how it is progressing. Mina is this very innocent girl who's, very scared almost of the whole situation, and we get to see that. But then also we get the fiery Van Helsing who's ready to take on Dracula, and he's very wise. So that contrast between the types of characters on the same side is definitely a positive for the whole deep narrative sequence.
And I think it also adds a personal tone to it, because oftentimes one of the character knows something or expresses something that another character doesn't know yet. So, for example, when Jonathan's away and Dracula traps him in his castle, and then he ends up at the hospital, Mina worries about him and wonders what he's doing. He's not writing anymore, but Jonathan writes in his diary how much he loves Mina and misses her, but Mina doesn't necessarily know that yet. And that brings in the theme of relationships and love in Dracula. And what other themes do we think are most important in this novel?
I think, there's a Christian tie almost throughout the whole novel. And going on that, do you see anyone that's symbolic of a Christian symbol or anything like that?
I mean, some might say that Van Helsing is the second coming of Jesus. I mean, he is able to perform medical advances well before like they're practiced regularly and safely, blood transfusions and things of that sort.
And then there's also definitely a tie between Dracula and the devil. I mean, they always talk. Or Stoker always talks about the fiery red eyes of Dracula and how they light up whenever he's going to have another meal, and so he's definitely the epitome of evil. Do you ever?
Well, I was going to go further on that about the Van Helsing being a Christ-like symbol. Is that he plays the role of mentor and teacher to the other members of his party. He's the one who brings in this knowledge of the supernatural, despite his he's a professor of medicine and all of that. But he's the one who, particularly his former pupil, John Seward, he tries to open him up like Jesus did, with his disciples to, his love and his God's, world. But in Van Helsing's case, he needs to open up his disciples to thinking outside of just, Western medicine, and they need to open themselves up to the supernatural.
And he's also able to keep everyone calm and in line, and when everyone's kind of panicked and trying to figure out what the plan's going to be, he's definitely like the head honcho and making the plan, setting them straight, and saying, you're doing this, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Having that leadership quality is definitely Christ-like symbol also.
And other than Van Helsing, there's also other Christian ideas in there, like the idea of revenants, which when people come back from the dead, and this happens to both Lucy and other characters, and that's also a Gothic technique that's often used too.
This is a definitely character-driven novel. It's one character that represents evil against that whole fellowship of people, and one character who's not on either side really, but just a pawn in the grand scheme of things is Renfield, who I found very interesting. Do you guys have any thoughts about how what his role was in the novel, or why he was included?
I think that Renfield, he serves as almost a mirror for the whole novel. He's a mind case, and the novel is kind of a psychological thriller in some senses. So he's using both the plot to connect Seward to Dracula, to Mina, because he invites Dracula up into Seward's house. But then he also just reflects the theme of a little bit of craziness, and the whole zoophagous appetite that he has is really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dracula is evil, powerful persona. Renfield's attracted to him almost because he's a man of the simple desires, and Dracula is able to satisfy that, and that's kind of like a whole play on Dracula's ability to persuade people despite his evilness. There's one instance after Mina is attacked by Dracula and everyone discovers him. He runs away. Mina records in her diary that she almost liked the touch of Dracula. And that whole instance with Dracula and women is very interesting in the novel. I was wondering if either of you had anything to say about that.
Yeah, the whole lust for blood and lust for women. When John Harker is falling asleep, not in his bedroom, going against what Dracula said, and then having the three beautiful women dressed in white kind of walk in, and he kind of likes it, and they're teasing him and playing him, and he's almost going in to kiss, but then Dracula comes in and saves him.
That was evil. Yeah. Stoker clearly had some issues with women.
He clearly has some issues with attractive women. Like when Lucy gets bitten, she becomes a vampire. He talks about, or one of the characters talks about her voluptuous lips and how attractive she becomes, and so yeah, it's interesting.
Even Van Helsing's encounters in the end with the three women.
He almost folds.
He almost cracks under that pressure, but
he's a strong man.
Yes, absolutely.
Strong leader.
So I think that'll do it for our group discussion. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, have a great day.
That didn't record.
Stay classy.